In 1966, the American Bible Society put out a book that would transform the understanding of the Bible for so many people. This book was called Good News for Modern Man. It was a translation of the entire New Testament into common everyday English. And despite what today would be considered a rather problematic title, what? There's no good news for modern women? The translation was an enormous success. In fact, I would hold out the success of this translation, of this book, as an example of how much language has actually changed in English since 1966. But anyways, Good News for Modern Man was a success. And 10 years later, the American Bible Society topped that by publishing the entire Bible with an even better title, a much better title, The Good News Bible. And the American Bible Society never looked back. Ever since, that translation has remained one of the best loved and most widely used translations of the Bible into English, often referred to as today's English version now. It is, in fact, a translation that is used in our Sunday school and in the readings that are usually pre-recorded for our services. Joanne read from the Good News Bible this morning. And I know all that. I know that publication history because the church that I grew up in purchased several copies of Good News for Modern Man when they first came out. And then, when the Good News Bible came out, they purchased enough copies to place in all of the pews. And I remember that. I remember it. Because though I was just a kid, really, I was in the room when a bunch of adults were discussing the new Bibles. And they were not impressed. In fact, I remember exactly what they were talking about. They were talking about the very passage that we read from this morning, the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount. And you want to know what they were upset about? They were upset about the very first word. You see, in the translations that everyone had grown up with up until that point, the King James Version, the Revised Standard Version, the verse had always been translated like this: "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." But the man who was talking complained, the Good News Bible had the unmitigated gall to translate it like this: "Happy are those who know they are spiritually poor. The kingdom of heaven belongs to them." Happy? He cried, happy? That can't be right. That's got to be wrong. It doesn't make any sense. It says the poor in spirit. Yeah, he was still stuck with the old translation. And what does poor in spirit mean except unhappy? That's plain wrong. Because then that would mean happy are the unhappy. I remember hearing that. I remember that diatribe. It made an impression on me, stayed with me. I would probably count it as one of those formative events that birthed in me the desire to understand the Bible and what it was really saying. It's one of the things that led me to seminary and to the work that I do now. In the course of my studies, yes, I got the opportunity to learn New Testament Greek. Wouldn't necessarily call myself an expert, but yeah. I did learn to read the original Greek text of the Gospel of Matthew for myself. And if I were able to time travel back to that room where that discussion was taking place back in the late 1970s, I would actually have something intelligent to say about their criticism of the Good News Bible. And you know what I would have to say? I'd have to say, actually, happy is a pretty good translation. That's pretty much what the original Greek word means in contemporary English. The word, the Greek word in the gospel, refers to people who are in a contented and fortunate state. What's more, and most importantly, it was an ordinary everyday word in Greek. It was the word you would have used to describe anyone who was enjoying good fortune. Would have been how you wish somebody a happy birthday or congratulated them on the birth of their child. And see, this is where the problem is. Blessed is not an everyday English word. It's a special word, a word that is mostly reserved for religious situations and experiences. So happy is actually a pretty good translation, and probably much better than blessed. But you know what? There is a translation that might even be better. And I suspect the translators of the Good News Bible knew this, and they were afraid to use it, because it would have been a bit too much for those old men in the church where I grew up. But I'll bet they considered it. Yeah, the better translation would actually be to use the English word congratulations. Oh, can you imagine how that would have gone over with the religious folk of the late 1970s? I can just hear them now. Congratulations, congratulations. Why, that's just not right. How could Jesus have said something like congratulations to people who are poor in spirit, to people who mourn, who are meek, who suffer for doing the right thing? Those are all things that no one would congratulate anyone for. That's got to be a bad translation. And you know what? Those old folks would have been right about one thing. Or not that it would be a bad translation. That is what the word means. They would be right that it doesn't make sense. No one would say something like that. But here's the thing. Jesus did. Jesus did. Jesus looked out across a crowd of people who had gathered on top of a mountain, and he congratulated all of the people he saw who were weeping and mourning, who were poor and abused and mistreated for no good reason. Those people were all present. And he was standing there congratulating them. That's what he was saying. And the people who were standing there in the crowd listening to him, no doubt were reacting exactly like the men in my church did. They were all looking at each other and asking, hold on a minute, did Jesus just say what I thought he said? Is Jesus really standing there congratulating people who are poor, hungry, meek, persecuted? That doesn't make any sense. But you see, that's exactly the reaction that Jesus was trying to provoke when he said it. See, this is one of the problems we have with many of our Bible translations. It's not that they aren't accurate. Most modern translations are really quite accurate. No, it's that they often resort to special churchy language that has the effect of removing it all from the lives that we live every day. But Jesus and Jesus' disciples never spoke that way. They used real, everyday language. When Jesus spoke to the crowds, he was not trying to make them feel special, spiritual feelings. He was not trying to elevate them so far above the heavenly, into a heavenly plane that they were no earthly use. What he was doing was he was intentionally provoking them, pushing their buttons as a way of getting them to look at their lives from a very different point of view. So really, if you want to understand what it would have been like to stand there on that mountain and listen firsthand to, like, probably the greatest sermon ever preached, you shouldn't start by trying to figure out, well, what exactly did Jesus mean by poor in spirit? You shouldn't start by asking, when he said, blessed are the cheesemakers, whether he intended for that to be taken literally or it refers to any manufacturers of dairy products. I'm sorry, forgive me. I just cannot preach a sermon on the Sermon on the Mount without at least one Monty Python reference. No, actually, understanding the Sermon on the Mount starts with understanding the first word. That word, often traditionally translated as blessed, but then I'm suggesting ought to be translated as congratulations. You need to understand that word. You need to understand what Jesus is doing when he says it, because he's saying it to you. Jesus is saying it to you, the reader. That's the point of all this. Jesus is looking at you, at the very things you are struggling with right now. Are you tired right now because you've been working too hard? Jesus is looking at you and saying, congratulations. Are you worried, crippled with anxiety because you're not sure how you're going to pay your bills? Hey, congratulations. Are you worried about your health? Congratulations. Are you grieving for someone you've lost? Hey, congratulations. Are you upset because someone hasn't treated you right? Congratulations. Are you feeling any of those things? Or can you imagine feeling them? And someone comes up to you and says, congratulations. How would you feel? Confused? Mad? Probably. Well, that's exactly the kind of reaction Jesus is trying to provoke with these Beatitudes. And unfortunately, our saintly and religious language we use in our translations has hidden that provocation from us. We need to get back to that. Jesus wants you to be confused, maybe even wants you to get mad when you hear these Beatitudes. But that's only the beginning of the reaction he's looking for. What Jesus is really aiming to do is he's aiming to shock you into looking at the circumstances of your life in a new way. And after you get over the initial confusion, Jesus is challenging you to look at the circumstances of your life, those things you're inclined to regret, those things you're inclined to complain about. And Jesus wants you to force you to ask yourself the question, what in this could I possibly be congratulated for? And please understand, Jesus doesn't mean by that you're just supposed to try and look at the bright side of all the bad things in your life. No. Even more important, Jesus is not saying with these Beatitudes that you should just put up with the bad or evil things in your life. I have heard too many stories of people who put up with terrible things like abuse, in pursuit of spiritual goals. Jesus is not calling for that. He never said be happy about being poor or hungry or persecuted, but he congratulated people because he knew that they didn't have to face such things alone, because the kingdom of heaven had come for them. What Jesus is really doing is he's challenging you to look at where God is at work in the things that are afflicting you. When, for example, Jesus congratulates those who are mourning, He's not saying that grief itself is a wonderful thing. Of course he isn't. But he is saying that if you're open to it, you will receive divine comfort in your grief. And that's something truly valuable. And even when Jesus speaks of being abused or being mistreated for doing the right thing, he's not saying there's something good about being in that situation, no. But I suspect he's congratulating you for the opportunity to see how, as you put your trust in God and speak out against abuse, or call out and change a system that allows abuse to happen, you will see God at work. Wow. Congratulations. You will see the kingdom of God at work. So take a good look at the things you're struggling with. Listen for Jesus' congratulations. And let it set you off on a quest to find how you can see God at work in and through all of the difficult things you face in your life. Now, I know this isn't going to be easy. It's really difficult to see these things, especially when you're in the midst of a personal trial. So let me suggest another application that's a little less personal, perhaps, but in some ways more powerful. We are in the middle of a process here at St. Andrew's Hespeler that involves, among other things, taking a good look at some of the challenges that the church and our congregation faces at this particular moment of intense change. And I understand that as we look at these things, a lot of it feels really hard. We feel fearful about the future. We might feel immense grief over some of the things we feel as if we've lost in the church. These are not easy emotions to deal with. But let me just challenge you, therefore, with one thought. What if Jesus is looking at us all as we struggle with all of these difficult thoughts, these difficult feelings? Jesus is saying, congratulations! Jesus is saying congratulations. Not because Jesus doesn't understand how difficult these things might feel for us, but because Jesus understands how exciting it is and will be to be part of the beginning of God doing something new among us. And if we can hold on to that excitement, I believe we will discover the true nature of the kingdom of heaven at work among us here and now. Lord our God, thank you for the challenge of your congratulations. Amen.